My name is Naomi Marcus. When I was a child, I went to sleep at night listening to my mother play the piano. She played Beethoven and Mozart sonatas, Chopin preludes and waltzes, and Schubert impromptus. When I was very young, my dad took singing lessons and learned the baritone arias from Don Giovanni, but his real expertise was as an instrumentalist. He and Mom met because they studied with the same piano teacher. Dad was an instrumental music teacher at Morris High School in the South Bronx and could play almost any instrument, but his main instrument aside from piano was the clarinet. Dad had a second job as music director for a Reformed Jewish congregation in Croton-on-Hudson, a few towns north of Pleasantville where we lived. During the summers, he rehearsed the adult choir, and since it was a Reformed temple, Dad played the organ during the services, providing a hushed and reverent background to the prayers. Synagogue melodies were familiar to me, but the more staid and reserved musical context of the Reform service was very different from the expressive and personal davening that I've become used to in conservative synagogue. Not that I wasn't aware of the tradition of spontaneous and expressive Jewish music. Passover Seders were a joyous experience in our home, full of singing, of course, but also an opportunity for my dad to show off his talents as a storyteller. My Protestant friends still remember how much they enjoyed the Seders they attended at our house. Music was the family business, and my sister and I breathed in a musical atmosphere. Both of us started piano lessons with Mom around the time that we entered school. My parents participated in community music groups, and we spent our summers in a cottage near Tanglewood in the Berkshires. Many of our neighbors played in the Boston Symphony Orchestra. My sister Deborah learned how to play the violin and joined the Buffalo Philharmonic, a position she holds today. I learned to play the flute and participated in music groups at school and in the community. Unlike my sister, who always felt comfortable with her identity as a musician, my feelings about the family trade were more complicated. I stopped playing the piano in high school, but continued to study the flute. I learned the music, the notes and phrasing quickly, as long as it wasn't too technically demanding, but I didn't have much patience for practicing. The painstaking process of perfecting the performance of a piece, developing an individual interpretation, and making that interpretation a part of me didn't capture my attention. Also, there was a glut of high school flutists competing for positions in student orchestras. When I went to Barnard, I joined the Columbia Band and Chorus in my freshman year and became co-chair of the music committee for the Greek Games, a now abandoned Barnard tradition dating back to the days when every educated person studied the classics. By my sophomore year, I settled down to academic pursuits and gave up on extracurricular activities, although I continued to study flute privately. The motivation to practice was gone once I left Barnard, and I picked up the flute only occasionally, but I still attended concerts wherever I lived. My husband and I drove up the back roads on the west side of the Hudson to join the crowds at Woodstock. Once we moved to Chicago, I attended chamber music concerts on the University of Chicago campus and symphony concerts downtown. When I lived in London, I enjoyed opera at ENO, the English National Opera, and Covent Garden, part of the Great British Theatre tradition. Back in New York, I became an annual subscriber to Carnegie Hall, the Philharmonic, and even the Met. My friends have learned that I'm willing to listen to any works by composers ranging from Bach and Mozart to Nico Muhly and Kaija Sarayahu. After studying in Chicago and London, I returned to New York and began tentatively to look for a Jewish community where I felt comfortable. I didn't feel I had much in common with Jews my age in Riverdale. They all seemed to come with a family consisting of a husband, a wife, and 2 or more children who were in the market for Hebrew school and bar mitzvah training. I, on the other hand, was single, and my boyfriend at the time was an outspokenly atheist Puerto Rican. One of my outreach attempts to the Jewish community brought me to Ansche Chesed to deliver holiday packages to the elderly with Dorot. I decided to return for a Friday evening service. The poetry of the liturgy, Yedid Nefesh, the introductory psalms, Lecha Dodi, touched my soul. Even better, the people in the room looked like they might have something in common with me. Once I joined the shul, I realized that the real action was on Saturday mornings. After a few Shabbatot, I became impatient with a learner's minyan and decided that I preferred an annual Torah cycle and a formal devar to the triennial cycle and discussion-style devar of the West Side minyan. The laning in the sanctuary, however, was often impenetrable to someone with my limited Hebrew skills. In the West Side minyan, some of the laners chanted the text to a melodic trope that was a pleasure to hear. In particular, a woman named Trudy Balch read Haftarah in a lovely voice with a trope that made the words easy to follow. I got the opportunity to study Haftarah trope with Trudy when the shul held a fundraising auction, and Trudy offered to teach Haftarah for a $100 contribution. I donated my $100 and began learning the Rosh Chodesh Haftarah, which Jerry Rake, who assigned laning in Haftarahs, told me would be available in a few months. Trudy and I became friends. She and I had both graduated from Barnard. She also had studied flute, and we occasionally got together to play duets. She passed away a few years ago, and I miss her friendship. My successful Haftarah debut gave me confidence, and when the synagogue offered the opportunity to study for an adult bat mitzvah, I took advantage of it. Trudy helped me prepare my second Haftarah, which was Pinchas Matot. Jerry Rake taped the maftir for me to learn, and I wrote a dvar on Zelophehad's daughters. The day before my bat mitzvah, I drove around Riverdale to pick up provisions for Kiddush. I continued to read Haftarot when those were available, and a few years later, I took a laning class with Jerry Rake. For several years, I tried to lane every 4 to 6 weeks. My Hebrew skills had improved considerably, but I needed that amount of time to become comfortable confronting the hand-lettered Masoretic text with no vowels or pronunciation. It was easier for me to learn the words along with the melody of the trope because the trope follows the grammar of the pasuk and emphasizes its meaning. One time after I had laned, Natasha Hirschhorn complimented me and invited me to join the community chorus that she was hoping to establish. Once Shirei Chesed was established, I joined the soprano section, occasionally switching to alto when lower voices were needed. I enjoyed choral singing so much that I decided to join an independent chorus in my home community of Riverdale. I've been singing in the Riverdale Choral Society for many years and enjoy performing the classical repertoire that I first heard as a child. Unfortunately, Natasha has found it necessary to change rehearsal nights for Shirei Chesed to Wednesdays, the same evening as Riverdale Choral Society rehearsals. I chose to stay with the Riverdale Chorus. Once I began to sing, I realized that I needed some instruction in vocal technique. Natasha suggested that I study with Kathy Lawrence. She has proven to be a skilled and systematic teacher who has changed my entire singing technique. I'm even capable of singing an occasional solo now. Ansche Chesed has enriched my life by connecting me with the Jewish community, introducing me to many new friends, and expanding my understanding of Jewish culture and learning. But who knew that this synagogue would bring me closer to music?